on Instagram and Facebook. Sorry that took me a second. I got logged off on Facebook, but we are all good to go. So I'm here without Kara today, as you can see. So she's on vacation in Mexico, which is very important, like she talked about last week in her live, because this is the time of year where we don't get a lot of sunshine. So it's really important that we make sure that we nourish ourselves with vitamin D. And a lot of times during the winter, especially if you live up north, it's not really possible. And if you can see behind me, it's actually cloudy and rainy down here, and it kind of has been for the last 3 months. So we're not getting vitamin D down here either in Texas. And so escaping, like Kara's in Mexico right now, sitting on the beach, and I was in Singapore and Thailand the last 2 weeks, also trying to soak up the sun. So yeah, and actually she's here on Instagram. I think I'm gonna see if she can join us. Here we go. This would be really cool if this can happen. And I'm sorry for all of you on Facebook, you might not be able to see, but I think Kara is gonna join. Okay, she said hola. There she is.
Gosh.
Hi, this is working.
Oh my gosh.
That's
I wasn't
awesome.
expecting, I know, but I wasn't expecting the video.
We caught Kara in Mexico chilling out, having a margarita.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Well, awesome.
There.
Look at your
I'll at least put the
background.
beach behind me.
There you go. So I was just kind of saying to everyone about vitamin D and how important that is, like you were talking about last week.
I'm soaking some in right now.
Good. Yeah, and so that's obviously only doable by the sun, so it absorbs through your skin. And this week we were going to talk about our grains episode, which was this last week, and we talked a lot about the importance of grains for our health, even though they can kind of have that stigma, the stigma of carbs and all of that, and people trying to cut them out, but they're really losing out on a really beautiful food that's so important for our health. So do you have anything to say about that right now, Kara? Oh, I think we're kind of losing you. Oh no, we're breaking up.
I'll chime in if I can. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we're losing Kara. It's breaking up a bit. All right. Well, Kara, feel free to type in, and then we'll just answer your questions and chat that way, if that's cool. Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. So we're just going to go just with us. Sorry. Technical difficulties, but we got Kara on for a hot sec. So getting to the grains. So again, this is such a hot topic. People are cutting grains out of their diet. It's part of keto. It's part of paleo. It's part of Atkins. But you see this happening over and over and over again, and you might be wondering why. And some people might find it actually successful for a little bit of time. But then that's kind of it after a while. Then they start to plateau and they start to gain their weight back, and they wonder, well, this was helping me before, so I'm going to stick to it and just keep avoiding grains, keep avoiding carbs, keep avoiding bread, and then nothing ever happens again. Well, what's going on behind the scenes is carbohydrates are a beautiful thing. They are loaded with glucose, and everything that you eat, even a piece of kale, will turn into glucose with your body, because that's how the body uses it. It's a sugar, and every cell in your body runs off of glucose. So everything that you eat turns into glucose. Carbohydrates are just a little higher in glucose. So if we eat a lot of them and we're also not exercising a lot, we'll end up with some glucose stores, and they store in the liver, and then they store throughout the rest of the body. And usually you tend to see that more around the midsection, maybe a little extra fat around there. That can show that you have some excess glucose stores. So cutting out grains or carbohydrates and bread for a bit of time might allow you to burn through some of those glucose stores. So that's why people have success when they first start Atkins or paleo or, any of those keto, any of those trendy diets that are taking people off of carbohydrates. They have success initially because it allows you to burn through the excess glucose stores. But where the downfall is they stay on that, they plateau, and they don't really notice it because it's kind of subtle. And then all of a sudden they start gaining weight back and wonder, well, shoot, why am I gaining weight again? I'm going to really make sure I'm cutting out carbohydrates. And they go really hard on it. And then they're just gaining more weight back and back and back. And what's happening is the body's not getting that glucose like it needs. Because again, glucose is energy, so your body needs energy. So cutting it out for the long haul is not the right thing. Give yourself a break from it, absolutely. Springtime is the perfect time to do that, and we'll talk a lot more about that in the next couple weeks, because that's when the spring equinox actually happens, and we shift into that. So we'll talk a lot more about that. So if you need to or feel like you want to give yourself a bit of a break from glucose and bread and things like that, that's the time to do it. But for right now, we want to be eating them, especially in the wintertime, because they are things that we were able to harvest for thousands of years when we were going through our agricultural evolution. We harvested all these grains, we were drying them, and then we were able to store them. So the time that we were mostly eating them was during the winter when other foods might not be as prevalent. So this is the time. It's energetically too. This is something that Kara touched on. Kara right now is saying not sustainable, but a good to use as a head start on weight loss. Yeah, exactly. So it's a good way to start the weight loss. You can burn through those glucose stores, but then you have to add them back in. And what Kara was talking about last week was that synergy. So when we look at food microscopically, and we're only looking maybe at glucose, or we're only looking at the carbohydrates or the sugars or, the vitamin E or whatever we're looking at it so microscopically, and that's not how the body and the earth functions. It functions off of energy and synergy. Things work together and we eat them together. So when we're cutting out a whole food group of grains, right? We're cutting them out completely. There's so much more to grains than just glucose or carbohydrates. This synergy, and the synergy actually is an energy. It's a sweet energy, right? So grains are kind of sweet, and it's also a calming energy. So you think of oats, right? And oats are classically used for calming the nervous system. If you have a rash on your skin, you could take an oat bath. Eating oats as a porridge is just really calming and soothing. So all grains have this calming property to them, which is so important, especially with our stressful lifestyles. We need to be able to calm the body down. So again, if we're cutting these out for the long haul, we're not getting that, which again is then revving up our stress and everything like that. And so we're being very depleted. Because it's this sweetness, and in Chinese medicine, I talk a lot about this. We touched a bit about it in our sweet episode. Sweet is the flavor of energy, of qi. Your body knows that. That's why it craves sweet, right? It might be craving bread. It might be craving sugar. It knows that that's going to give the body energy. So again, if we're cutting this out for a long period of time, we're not getting that sweetness in our life that the body really needs on that level. So we start pulling from our deep reserves, energy reserves, and we start depleting ourselves, and we start getting adrenal fatigue, and even that can follow up with thyroid conditions, which is what we're going to talk about next week. So we're starting to deplete the body when we're not eating these grains. So I just kind of wanted to give you guys an overview about how important they are, why we need them in our diet. Cutting them out for a short period of time can be a really good idea, but we really, we need them. They're beautiful. So I just want to say hi to a few people that have joined. So hey, Keisha on both, and Tess, and Karen. Oh my goodness. Thank you guys so much for joining. So if you have any questions, everyone who's logged on right now, type them in. I'll answer your questions about grains. We're going to talk about gluten, carbs, bread. We're going to cover it all. So another thing that's really important to think about with our digestion of grains, because people have seen some digestive issues. A lot of them are linked to gluten, and we'll talk about that in a second. But just in general, just looking at grains in general, what's really important is that we need to actually start digestion of any carbohydrate in our mouth. So saliva is there. It's a digestive fluid that has amylase and a couple other enzymes in there that help break apart carbohydrates and that sugar structure. They also help break apart fats. So a lot of times what's happening, especially when it comes to bread or pasta or pizza, like any kind of bready, grainy thing, we tend just to take a couple chews and then swallow. So we're swallowing these whole bits of grains and carbs and things like that. It comes into our stomach, and our stomach, despite how acidic it is, it's not there to digest carbohydrates. Your stomach is to digest protein. So the carbs then end up in your gut, and that's the second place that carbs digest. But if it kind of skipped the mouth, then it's putting a lot of strain on your gut now to digest it. So this is one of the biggest things that's happening, is that even when we are eating grains, we aren't chewing them and digesting them properly. So it's going to add a lot of strain on the gut. People can feel it as bloating. It can even just cause this leaky gut strain that, again, we've talked about in other episodes. And especially then when we add in, if it's a gluten-containing grain. So what gluten is it's a protein. And remember what I just said before, proteins digest in the stomach. So gluten itself is a great thing, right? It's been natural, it's been part of our diet for thousands of years. But the issue is that man came in and started manipulating gluten and made it 4 times the size, genetically modified it, because we could get bigger crop yields and we could have a longer shelf life, right? This was all for money, not for your health. And it ends up in your stomach and it can't fully digest because it's so big. So then it ends up in your gut. So not only are we taking big bites of food and swallowing them, the gluten, if it's gluten containing, also will end up in our gut. And it's really causing a lot of strain and a lot of issues. And then what happens with the leaky gut is it goes through the gut lining and ends up in our blood system. So then the blood is now toxic, and it can make you feel heavy, depressed, foggy-minded. Your body starts to attack your blood because it sees it in the blood, right? So that's where autoimmune diseases can come in. So this is where the whole gluten and grain and everything like that goes. I just wanted to see, scrolling down here, Kara says, such important information, and you explain it so well. You're amazing, Megan. Thank you, Kara. I'll do my best to of reading these things. I kind of just go on tangents. So thanks, Kara. I miss you, though. I'm glad she's getting some sun. It feels so good to have a little bit of color now that I've gotten back. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Keisha. Love all the info. Thank you. So that's really what's going on with gluten. Another thing with gluten specifically is, again, that protein gets into our intestine, and our intestines have these little villi, these little microvilli, and they're like little sea anemones. I saw a lot of those when I was snorkeling last week, right? And sea anemones do that because it's a little sticky. It has a little bit of like a mucilage on the outside. It allows for more surface area for things to catch on to so that it can absorb and digest. So most of our nutrition absorption comes and happens in our gut. Hey, Rachel. Oh, hey, so thank you so much, Leshar, for joining. Oh my gosh, hi. We have a lot of people on today. This is a good episode. So these little microvilli are there to absorb all the nutrients. And when gluten comes into the gut, like I said, because it should have been taken care of in the stomach, but it's so big, ends up in the gut, and it ends up flattening out these microvilli. It's like a paste, like a glue. So even if you're not celiac, or even if you're not really sure if you have a gluten intolerance, what is happening to everyone is that this, oh, hey, Mom, my mom's on. That's awesome. Is this paste pastes down these microvilli. So now what used to be a way for our body to digest and absorb nutrients, that's flattened out. And so when we are eating the healthiest diet in the world, it's passing right by and we're not being able to take advantage of it. So it's the other thing with gluten. So Danny, my husband, and I were gluten-free for 3.5 years, and we were doing it mostly for his eczema. And I just wanted to do an experiment and see what it was like to not have gluten for a while. And it felt amazing, especially in that first month. Like, you really notice it. And I do recommend, if people think they have any issues going on, especially like I said, in the springtime, this is the perfect time to do it. Give yourself a break of gluten and other containing grains like that, and just see if maybe there is a sensitivity. If you feel better, then you probably have a little bit of a sensitivity. If you add it back in and all of a sudden you feel bloated, yeah, that's showing that there's a sensitivity. And like I said, most people are sensitive. So we gave it up for 3.5 years. And because Danny has eczema, that gut connection with eczema is always there, right? That leaky gut situation. So we want to make sure that we are allowing the gut to heal and not giving it any other strain. But the reason we actually added gluten back in is because we're not really trying to do, and just like anything, taking it out of your diet should always be a short-term thing. It's not supposed to be a life sentence, right? You want to take it out for a period of time so that the body can heal, and then add it back in. And when you add it back in, adding it in these ways that are easier for the body to digest will aid in your body healing and being able to digest it better in the future. So we added it back in because the other thing is we started to get a little sloppy with it. We would have a, gluten-free beer. We would have, gluten-free bread and all of these things. Well, the downside of those is that they're very highly processed. So they're full of sugar. They have all these processed grains in them. And that's not good either. So we were like, all right, let's add it back in. But when we do, we're going to make sure that we are doing it in the right ways. We are going to look for sour and have sourdough bread. So souring and fermenting things, like we've talked about before, and Kara is a huge pro of, is it's automatically already breaking down the food for you. So fermenting something is going to break everything down. So when you do eat it, it's easier for your body to digest. In addition to that, it has all of the pre and probiotics and everything like that. So a sourdough bread is a really good option if you're gluten sensitive or just want to switch it up. And another thing is that we want to think, and especially if you do go gluten-free, you think outside the loaf. That's what Kara says, and I think it's such a cool term to use. So think outside the loaf, think outside the pasta and things like that. We're going to be eating rice, right? Rice is naturally gluten-free. We have oats, which are fantastic, like I touched on earlier, right? They're really calming to the nervous system. Something like quinoa is technically a seed, but you can cook it similar to a grain, so that's an option. Buckwheat is one of our favorite things, and we cover all of these options in the episode, so if you haven't seen that, head over there now. But think outside the loaf. Think of the grains that we have evolved eating, and incorporate those in your diet. We have a couple questions here. So from Karen, she asks, so how do we make sure we're eating correctly to break down the gluten? Great idea or question. So like I said, digestion starts in the mouth. So chew 20 times before you swallow. And I know that sounds crazy, but it does two things. One, it's making sure that you are chewing. So it's mixing the food, it's breaking it down with your teeth, but it's also mixing it and breaking it down with your saliva. Another thing that's happening is that it's a meditative process. It slows us down. It converts our nervous system from the fight or flight to the rest and digest. That can start happening so then the body is ready to start digesting it. So that's the best thing that you can do, especially when it comes to breads and grains and things like that, is really, really chew it in your mouth, then swallow it. That is going to help so much, even if you are eating gluten, to digest it. Now, getting into the way that grains should be prepared, again, we talk a bit about this in our episode, is traditionally grains were soaked or fermented before they were eaten. So we talked about this also in our bean episode. Beans are very similar to that because grains and beans all have this anti-nutrient on the outside, which is for the survival of that plant so that it doesn't get eaten by everything and then goes extinct, right? So soaking it allows that anti-nutrient to come off. Fermenting it, like I said before, also like in a sourdough bread, or sprouting is another one, right? So it's allowing the nutrients to escape easier, to transform. The synergy of that, it's a little bit of a slower process because remember, grains are that synergy, that kind of slow, calming synergy. So treating it like that, soaking it like that, will help your body digest it easier again. And Kara says, be sitting down, not driving, also in fight or flight. Exactly. So you see people all the time, like eating a sandwich, or even worse, like McDonald's or something in the car while they're driving. Oh my gosh, their body is not going to be able to digest that. They're going to get so sick, right? And so much strain and so much stress going on. The body's not going to digest that food, right? So there's going to become issues. So yes, taking that time, 5 minutes. I mean, really, that's not a lot of time. Anyone can carve 5 minutes out of your day to sit down and eat lunch. Same thing when you get home. Sit down and have dinner, you know, with yourself, with your loved ones. Sit down at a table. I'm at my dining room table right now, and Danny and I do our best to eat here as often as possible because of that reason. Slow down, allow the body to digest it. So no matter what you're eating, even if you are eating a hamburger, it's going to digest easier, and the body's actually going to be able to take it apart and absorb the nutrients that it needs and get rid of the stuff that it doesn't. Otherwise, it's going to seize, hold on to everything, and then you're going to have issues coming later. Let me see, what else was again, thank you so much for these questions. Keep asking. So yeah, and just, you know, so with gluten, like I said before, it's a good thing to see maybe if you do have a little sensitivity. Most people do, almost everyone does, because you can't not, if you're living in America eating genetically modified gluten, it's just not normal for our body to digest it. So give yourself a bit of a break. Springtime is the perfect time to do that. We're going to talk a lot about cleansing, but winter, especially if you're living in more of the northern hemisphere where it's cold, just be a little careful about cleansing too early. Down here in Houston, even though it's raining again and cloudy again, we're starting to see this growth happen. We're starting to see the dandelions come up. We're seeing the blossoms on the trees come out, right? So this shift is starting to happen all the way from the equator all the way up. And I was on the equator last week for 2 weeks, and the seasonal way of eating there is very different. It's pretty much the same all year round, because even though the earth is shifting, the equator kind of stays the same. So it's the tropics, right? And in the tropics, you have lots of juicy fruits. They do eat a lot of rice there. So I was making sure as best as I could that I was really chewing as much as I could, because it's lots of rice, lots of meat. And they do eat vegetables, but it's kind of just chopped up and in there. So my veggie, I feel like intake wasn't as high as normal. But my fruit intake was much higher. I love tropical fruits, and they're so sugary, juicy, and hydrating, and energetically that's very expansive. So when you're in a hot place, you see those types of foods grow because it helps you cool down. In cooler places like the upper United States, in the United States in general, you'll see more of these warming fruits, right? So maybe some citrus down south, and as you move further up, it's going to be more berries, things that are a little bit more concentrated. They're still sweet, still hydrating, but you kind of have to wait till summer till you see those peaches and the watermelon and all of that come through, because we're not tropical up here. So definitely always eating in season for where you're at. Gosh, I think that is really, I touched on a lot of things, right? Just to recap, chew your grains. Saliva digests all of the carbohydrates in your mouth. So don't skip that step no matter what you're eating, right? Grains are sweet. They're going to give you energy. So if you need to burn some glucose, they're full of glucose, burn some glucose stores, give yourself a break from grains, a couple weeks, maybe a month if you really wanted to. Do that during the springtime, burn through your glucose stores, but then start adding them back in. And when you add them back in, again, like Kara says, think outside the loaf. Right? Think of all of these ancient grains. You can Google them. You can watch our episode. We have them all laid out there for you so you can see all of those. You need them in your diet. The synergy of the grain is calming. It's going to calm the nervous system. It's going to nourish the body on that deeper level. So you really want that. And then with the gluten, right, just know that if you can find GMO free, you can find ancient grains, breads, things like that. You can find sourdough is the best thing. If you can soak your grains, right? So like if you have farro or even rice, if you can the day before, just cover it with some water and then cook it the next day. That's really going to help break it down for you, right? So we're going back to basics, and like Kara says, we're going simply seasonal with this, right? We are just going back to tradition. We're trying to slow it down, eat the foods that have grown in this type of condition, weather, season, and then bring your nervous system into that rest and digest, and then you're going to be able to digest foods so much better. And those grains are so important for you, so don't cut them out for too long, okay? All right, so if you do any of those bad diets, add them back in, please. Karen says, thanks, I've learned so much watching Simply Seasonal. Thank you, Karen. Oh, we're so happy to have you. Thank you so much. Yeah, and if this is helpful for any of you, please share it with your friends and family. Again, if you go to our website, simply-seasonal.com, sign up for the email updates, because every week you get a brand new episode sent straight to your inbox. So if you haven't done that already, head on over there right now, because we're about to end, and do that, and also send it to a friend. That would be great. So thank you guys so much. Kara, of course, sends her best laying out at the beach in Mexico, absorbing vitamin D for all of us. So unfortunately, we couldn't have her on for too long, but anyway, thank you guys so much for joining. Hearts, thank you. And we'll catch you. Oh, yeah. Tomorrow, the episode that's launching is our cruciferous episode, which we are talking all about thyroid conditions. So that's kind of a big one. A lot of us, especially women, have been diagnosed with thyroid conditions, and we talk all about how to naturally heal the thyroid and using cruciferous veggies. So join us for that. All right. Well, thank you guys. We will see you soon. All right. Take care. Thanks, Kara. Bye.